everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Espresso with Matt. I'm here with an old friend of mine, Brian Soudant, from back in my days at Colgate University, former football player and a member of my fraternity. And we've connected over the last few months, and we have a great conversation in store for you. Brian, thank you so much for joining today. Really happy you're here. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Matt. Thank you for having me on. And it's amazing to reconnect after all these years. You know, the power of shared experiences and friendship is far more durable than I think we realize. So it was great to reconnect.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you and I look exactly the same we did a few years ago. So hey, Brian, first of all, big question we always have to ask, right at the beginning of the episode. What's in the coffee cup today? What you got going on?
I'm drinking Irish breakfast tea.
Oh,
It is my go-to. I probably have more than I should, but definitely a couple cups each morning with a little bit of milk, and it's just my go-to.
so you're a
Hot
tea
water
drinker.
and a tea bag, and you're on your way.
Very cool. So for myself, I've actually got the Dunkin' Donuts today. I had to drop off my daughter for school today, a little rainy day. Didn't have a chance to brew a cup. And I'm also looking for that Dunkin' Donuts sponsorship. I think I'm aimed to be one of the Dunkings next year because I thought that commercial was amazing. I had a lot of fun with that at the Super Bowl. But yeah, so I got the Dunkins today, but usually I got the double espresso, but today I'm doing with the coffee. So you
Yeah,
got Irish tea?
I do. When I'm outside the house, I love espresso, and I love Dunkin' espresso. I love Starbucks espresso, and I'm a big fan of the handwritten notes that are back on Starbucks coffee
Well,
cups.
little touch of class. It's nice. I like that too. Nothing wrong with a handwritten note at any time. Uh, so Brian, we reconnected, but I think you have a fascinating career journey, a lot of really cool accomplishments. Love you to kind of give a sense of your career, your professional progression, everything you're doing, and what you're up to now. If you can just give the audience a little bit of summary of that, would be great.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was this close to going into teaching when I was at Colgate, and due to a inability to play football and be a graduate student in the teaching program there, I decided to say, look, I'm going to go out and look and find a job. And what do I want to do? Always like people. I always found tangible products really interesting, and I got an opportunity to join the E&J Gallo Winery selling organization right out of college in their sales management development program. And was there for about 10 years, loved it. Huge part of my personal and professional development. Packed up, moved to different cities when I was in my 20s. Having grown up outside of New York City and upstate New York, I was able to, live in some other metro areas. And found just being on the end, the tip of the spear in sales to be really interesting, but always very curious about what actually goes on to get salespeople in the position to go win and to go be successful at the point of attack. Um, Decided to go back and I did some B2B selling at Boston Scientific for a couple of years. Liked it, didn't love it. Realized I wanted to go back to graduate school. Did that at Boston University. An amazing experience. I did that in 2008, 2009. Actually spent the summer of 2008 in China as part of an overseas study program, which was amazing. And then after graduate school, I've worked in for a variety of settings. I worked for a small dairy company out in the Pacific Northwest called Smith Brothers Farms, and was the director of sales and marketing there. That was super fun. Smaller family-run business. Went on the other side of the desk, and I encourage anybody in a sales role to do that if you can in your career. And worked as the category manager and buyer at an amazing company called Giant Eagle in Pittsburgh, PA, a $10 billion retailer behemoth. And if you go to Pittsburgh, Cleveland, or Columbus, Ohio, now in Indiana, you can't miss going to a Giant Eagle. Loved that. Got to see sales from a different perspective. And then came back to New England, where I've been living here for about 10 years. Worked for a long run at a company called the Boston Beer Company, doing sales operations, sales enablement, a lot of that connective tissue work inside of an organization for a sales organization. And then, after COVID, left them to look at some new experiences, worked for a small hard cider startup. And then I've been doing consulting for the last year and a half and also teaching at the University of Massachusetts. So, careers are they're kind of like football games, Matt. You don't really know how they're going to unfold. You might have a playbook, but chances are that game's going to finish very differently than when the way you planned it out. So,
Well,
um,
it's such a great point, Brian. I was talking with someone the other day who's, I might be doing a little coaching with her, and she's, still just starting her career in healthcare. And I met her at a networking event, so I did a little, coaching call, and she described herself as an early careerist, and I was like, early careerist. I'm like, I never heard that term really, but like, she's like, oh yeah, I'm early into my career. I'm like, okay, just say that. I'm like, not sure what careerist is, but it's funny to me because I don't know if I had a playbook per se of where I wanted to go in my career. I ended up at one facility for 25 years. It's amazing the twists and turns people's careers go. And now you kind of come full circle back to that original passion of teaching, of being a consultant, of going from that thing. It's an amazing journey. Take all that experience to come back to, now as a consultant and also as a professor teacher. What a great journey. And I love what you said also. It was a really great point, being on different sides of the table, and that breadth of experience. You not only selling but buying, and that's just an amazing opportunity there. So absolutely
well,
right.
I'll give you two things from when I was at Colgate playing football, right? And Marty Fine, our O-line coach, I'm sure
Yes,
you remember Coach Fine well. We were having just a casual chat about life after college and what I wanted to do. And I told him I was thinking about going into teaching and I wasn't sure. And he said something to me that I still use to this day. He said, you don't need to be a teacher to be a teacher.
yeah,
You can go into anything and take that teaching mindset with you. You could go into sales. That's really about teaching other people about products, goods, and services. You could go into managing and leading teams. You're teaching people how to be effective in their jobs. And that always kind of stuck with me. You don't need to be a teacher to be a teacher. And then the second thing was, um, also having played tight end of, you talk about perspective. I mean, going from a room full of, no offense, Matt, big, sweaty, smelly linemen,
you forgot good
crammed into
looking.
each other on top of each other, watching film, where you had this just kind of camaraderie of a team of five out there, all doing the kind of grunt work. And then walking out of that room and going into the prima donna room of the skill players and the quarterback, the running backs, and everyone's worried about who's getting the ball, who's going to score, who's going to make the big play, right? Who, is coach feeding them the ball enough, et cetera. And that kind of perspective, I think, always kind of stuck with me a little bit of, you have to be able to look at things from different perspectives and recognize the kind of culture that's going to come with different groups that you're working with. And I think that's one of the compliments I got in a role was, I'm just as comfortable talking to people up above me in an organization as I am, underneath me in the organization. And I think,
So important.
some advice to young people is, try to just spend times with different groups of people, right? It was like a diversity thing when no one was talking about diversity, right? It was interesting. So.
Well, Brian, first of all, love those stories, and I will share a real quick Coach Fine story. I don't know if you remember, Coach Fine made us all carry tennis balls around to work on our hand strength because he felt like offensive line should be able to hold. And so, if you didn't have a tennis ball, equal the ski hill. And for those who are at Colgate, we had a ski hill on campus, which was pretty much torture to run up it. I went to see Titanic, the movie Titanic, at the nearest movie theater to Colgate, which is 45 minutes away, on a random Tuesday night with someone. Who I run into in the lobby? Coach Fine. As he's eating his popcorn, he goes, Palazzano, where's your tennis ball? I didn't have it. I was, at a movie theater. So I ran to ski hill the next day, and that was Coach Fine. But he was a great leader, and I love what you said about the offensive line. You know, you forgot good looking, but we'll forgive you there. But it is that group of individuals who have that kind of teamwork aspect. And I kind of describe myself a lot in that way of my philosophy working is like, I like being on stage, but I don't have to be in the front row. I don't need to spike the football. And I really take a lot of joy as a leader when I see others gain success and grow. And in some ways I'm translating that into this show is that I like the idea of helping others get their message out in a way and helping that. So it's such great metaphors for life. And what you said also about being able to talk to different people, different levels is so important. And great career advice for anyone out there. Be able to talk to everyone in the organization. And if you're in an organization, you some key people to know your CEO's executive assistant, have a great relationship with that person,
Yep.
have a great relationship with your facilities and your IT people. Those are people that could make your life much easier, much worse in an organization. Brian, you mentioned sales and your role with sales, and you and I talked a little bit about this over the last few weeks. You have this term that you talk about, all roads lead to sales. You have some great stories about your time as a sales, but that is such an interesting concept for me who worked in nonprofit all the years. Now I'm trying to build my own business. How do I close my how do I lead to sales? How do I monetize what I'm doing?
Sure.
Great conversation there, but maybe share some advice on that and what that sales mantra means to you for all the leaders out there.
Yeah, I'll give you a recent conversation I had with a CEO and then a story from my first week of my career. So I did some consulting work with a company last year, and the CEO said, I was like, what is your most pressing concern? He said, my most pressing concern is always revenue. He's like, CEOs, they usually, when a company sees declining revenues, that's usually when a new CEO comes in, right? That's usually when it's time for the CEO to leave. He's like, all roads, lead to sales in a sense of like, that's the first and most important thing is what is going on with top line revenue in an organization. And you can always find ways to drive more profit and more efficiencies and things like that. But top line sales is always, that's why it's the top part of an income statement, right? Is revenue. So that's the first part of your tax return is how much money did you make, right? So
That's true.
that's when there. I'll take it back to my first week on the job. I worked for Gallo, and in your early job, you were calling on liquor stores. I had about 60 liquor stores in the greater New Haven, Connecticut area that I would go visit every week, and I would ensure they had proper inventory levels, that our products were looking as good as possible on shelf, on display, in the cold box. And that, when we had new items come to market, we were getting those into distribution. So we had a very regimented playbook when we would go into a store about what we wanted to achieve in that anywhere from 20 minutes to 4 hours in a store, depending on what you had going on. And I was there with my boss the first week, this gentleman by the name of Tim Clark, who is just still to this day, one of the more interesting and kind of I think just really great salespeople that you come across.
Yeah.
And we're waiting for the retailer to free up so we can go talk to them and present some new products. And we're looking at the shelf and we're looking at some product, and he goes to me, he goes, do you know how many people went into getting this product, that played a role in getting this product on this shelf? And I'm like, I don't know, hundreds, thousands. He's like, yeah, probably hundreds of thousands when you actually think about it. He's like, there's, that product in there. There was grapes that were put in the ground. They were watered. They were, cared for. They were harvested. They were transported. They were bottled. There was a bottling that had to be designed, label that had to be designed, had to be shipped. It had to be priced, had to be received by a distributor. It had to get brought into the store. Somebody had to pick it up. He's like, all roads lead to you and me standing in this store, right? And everyone's depending on us to be good at sales, right? All those people that went into that, he's like, all roads lead to sales. All roads lead to us as the salespeople standing here in the store. And that unlocked curiosity for me of like, well, actually, that sounds really cool, a little scary, right? But really cool of like, well, how does this actually all work? So, I was in, New Haven, Connecticut. Modesto, California is where Gallo is headquartered. And I was always curious, like, what goes on out there in Modesto, right? What goes on at the headquarter level? What conversations are being had? And it goes back to that football mentality of like, well, how do you stitch all these activities and positions and roles and responsibilities together? So that's generally how I tend to think about things. And since then, I think I've probably kind of been on this quest to continue to learn about all these different inputs that go into bringing a product to market. And my areas of focus now are, how do you actually execute? All right. There's so many ideas that die in the vine, especially in food and beverage, that they just don't get into distribution. They don't get in front of the consumer. There's supply issues, or there's marketing concerns. It can go on and on and on. And So it's funny how like, I tell everyone like you'll never forget your first week on the job. It's like your first day at college. Everybody remembers their first day at college, your first day of high school, your first day. Not everybody remembers their first day at kindergarten, but you always remember your first and your best in life, right? And those are just two interesting stories I still tell to this day.
Well, Brian, I love that perspective of all roads lead to sales. And I'm sitting here thinking of my metaphors and in my experience. I worked in a nonprofit in a hospital for many, many years. To me, I had plenty of discussions in a boardroom or a group room with leaders and thought leaders and at the end of the day, it was like, okay, is the nurse on the floor? Is the technician on the floor following our policy? Because we can come up with the greatest idea. If it's not executed with the patient, they'll never see. I think a lot about how organizations do things like that. Like, how, when you go to Chick-fil-A, do they say, it's my pleasure all the time? How do they get people to do that? Like, I don't know how they get people to say that all the time. Or when you go to Disney World, how come they are so enthusiastic about you get on a ride versus I've been to Six Flags where I'm like, hey, my seatbelt's not buckled. They're like, whatever, let's go. Like that different culture, and sales is a perfect example. At the end of the day, all these roads lead to this idea that we're connected in such a meaningful way in an organization. And that perspective you bring, Brian, of like the organization only functions when everyone works together. It's such a great leadership message, and you know, really something more and more people should be thinking about. I love that creative thought process and that kind of let's look behind the proverbial label here and what's really going on.
Yeah, well,
That's
I think
awesome.
it's I think it's mission, vision, and values, right? That are always need to be clear, easily understood, and talked a lot about by leadership. All right, what is the mission of the organization of the company? What are we trying to get done? Where's our vision? Where are we going? And what are the values we're going to have to get there? Right. So I think about I I think Coach Biddle would say sometimes like Dave McCullough, our video guy, he was the most important guy on the team because he doesn't that recording doesn't take place. We can't understand and evaluate how we are doing, right? And we're losing a competitive edge that we might have over somebody else, right? So I think it's important for no matter where you sit in an organization that you have a line of sight into how you and when you're in a small organization, it's very tangible. When you're in a large organization, you can feel like you're a needle in a haystack. But everybody needs to know, hey, I'm showing up to work today. I'm performing my job function. How does this map back to what the mission of the
Great.
organization is? So if you think about your role in healthcare, right? Like, yeah, you might be at the front information desk, right? But you know what? You're getting people to the right place at the right time and you're providing them a great experience in a very stressful part of their life. You might be the thing that separates them from an okay experience to a great experience. Um, and I'll just leave you with like I ran an analyst team once of data analysts, and I said, look, you may not think that you are selling products, but you are providing data and input and
Yep.
analytics that's going to make the salesperson more impactful and get that buyer. It goes back to when I was sitting on the other side of the desk from a not sure, maybe to a yes, right? Because there's going to be an insight or some evidence that's presented that gets somebody to say yes. So I think it's very critical, but it really does start at the top. What is the mission and how do you drive everybody's
Well,
eyeballs to it and make them feel part of it?
you hit upon a very important leadership concept there that I think we can't talk about enough is getting everyone aligned towards a goal, that goal there. And people find worth in their job as long as they know something that's important. And I think that connection that, hey, you're just not crunching numbers, you're helping the salesperson here to make a product because they need that information. Hey, you're not just processing the paperwork here, you're making sure. I used to say this to my HR team when I ran the HR team in the hospital. Yeah, you're making sure the nurses are competent, have a license, so they are fully be able to deliver the care. That's your role. You're connected to patient care. I love what you said about Dave and film and practice. You're connected to our success, and that connection for leadership is so important. I was meeting with a senior leader of a nonprofit organization. He asked me a question. He's like, "If we change our culture, how would you assess that we've changed the culture?" I said, "Well, you're a 24/7 operation. I would come in on Saturday night at 3 in the morning and talk to your night shift and ask that person if they understood the new mission and vision. I said, do you think they would know that? Not if they do, I would say your culture's been pretty well spread across the organization. If they're half asleep and said, "What culture?" I think we have work to do because sometimes we focus on a 9 to 5 culture. We don't focus on the whole organization. So great point. Such a great leadership point that goes from sales to consultant, Brian. That's just the value you bring from your perspective of looking at tying those all together as a consultant and a leader on how you tie all this together to organizational success. These
Yeah, I
trends can,
think 100%, Matt. I think that skip level meetings I think are so underutilized because it forces leaders to get undiluted feedback from people inside of their org chart. And I think that you're straight on. Like I always think about when I worked in the dairy industry and I want to know what was going on in the yogurt section, I would go to the person that's stocking the yogurt shelves, right? What are people looking for? What product is out of stock the most, right? What would you do? What would you change about this section and the way it was laid out? And that was sometimes some of the best feedback you'd ever get. Same thing in the wine aisle, right? What are people coming in and asking for? Oh, people are really confused about red blends. They don't understand okay, wow. All right, that's interesting. Maybe we need to think about how to do that. So I agree. I think it's in a course I'm preparing to teach at UMass. We're talking about we're using Red Lobster, and I don't know if you heard about the new CEO that's come in as a one of the articles we're going to review and the stories we're going to review. It's a course on strategy, and talks about how he went out and he wanted to find the longest tenured people that were working at Red Lobsters and go talk to them because they remembered the time when the company was performing at a high level,
yeah.
and it's some roadblocks. And like, well, how do we get back there? But it's always the people that are kind of closer to the work that it can give you sometimes the most feedback. You got to be willing to do it.
Yeah.
And it requires hard work and time.
Well, the example for yogurt, I will say this: I go shopping often. I always get the wrong yogurt according to my wife and child. So I'm not sure if I know how to pick it right. But, the example of talking to that direct care staff and people on the line, such an important leadership takeaway. Brian, one of the things we talked a lot about over the last few weeks is this kind of transition and this idea that we're moving into different realms in the workforce in general. And congratulations too, you started your own consultant business. You're pivoting in different ways and you're bringing value in much different ways there. So maybe talk a little about that because I'm just seeing more and more people building their own brand and building their own company. And your perspective from sales on how to execute it can be so valuable to the individuals who are starting new brands out, like myself. Um, what lessons would you learn? And what would you talk to them about in those areas?
Yeah, it's a really interesting development that we've seen, and I think it's the power of these digital platforms that have come about. It could be LinkedIn, it could be other areas to kind of get your message out. I'd say first off, you know, don't be afraid, right? You're just you're gonna regret what you don't do in life more than what you do in life quite often. And I would say that networking is really important. We can talk a little bit more about that. But I do think that people are looking to build their personal brand because they're able to. Human beings have access to more information than we've ever had in any part of human history. And that can help us discover things. It can also help us be discovered, right? As people. And depending on what you're curious about and what you want to learn about, there's no shortage of ways to go and do that. I'm going to be in the car this afternoon for about an hour, 30 minutes each way. And I got an audiobook I'm digging into, right? And that's amazing, right? And that
Yep.
human beings didn't have that,
Yep.
whatever, 40, 50 years ago. We have that now. Um, I think that it's also something I think companies I think are a little, there's a lot of different opinions out there about side hustles and things that people are working on. I think everything's got to be put into context. But generally speaking, I think when you see curiosity and you see some willingness of people to grow and reinvent themselves, that would be, that's a good thing. Um, I think when you develop a set of skills that are of value in the marketplace, like I have over time, you probably underestimate the amount of people that you can help and in the ways that you can go and help them. And that's one thing I've learned. I work in a very competitive food and beverage industry. It's probably perhaps one of the most one of the oldest professions in the world is growing food and selling food, and it's one of the most competitive in the U.S. today. And I think your skills are always kind of in demand, and networking is incredibly important. But people are empowered more than ever before. The creator economy is going to be just fascinating to see how it unfolds,
Oh,
moving
it
forward.
really is. And Brian, your skills, I mean, we just over the last 15, 20 minutes talked about how your skills as leadership and sales easily translate to any leadership example. And so, I think the idea of being so niche to like, oh, I only could do this, I only could do that. We learn skills over our career that we can certainly share with others. And I love the idea you brought up this platform because I think there's a longing for people to connect more and more these days. And I think, over the last few months that I've been talking to more and more people about this, you know, the connections where it used to happen, kind of you work your 9 to 5 work, you went and did the softball league or you did the bowling league and you go from there. Those have been eroded over time. And I
Mhm.
think those connections now are needed more than ever. And I'm a big fan of social media platforms if it leads to authentic, real conversations. If you're just scrolling, getting into those scrolls where you just look at what everyone else has and you don't have, it can be very hurtful for your mental health. But if you use these platforms as a way to explore your interest or get your message out or learn, incredibly powerful. And you brought up a great point, the courage and the resilience it's needed right now. It's tough. It's
Yeah.
tough to kind of reinvent ourselves, and not that we reinvent ourselves, but kind of pivot and doing something a little differently. What was that for you? Like that resilience you needed, that courage, that kind of hey, I'm gonna try this something new. That was probably a tough decision. How did you get there?
I think there's a couple things. Well, first of all, I think, human beings crave community, right? And we will find community in any way, shape, or form. And so you've had this kind of community erosion, like you spoke about. I mean, the statistics around like things like pool halls and bowling leagues and other professional, groups, right, have kind of eroded, and it's springing up in other ways, right? It's springing up in ways that, maybe are a little more digital platforms. So human beings crave community. We strive for it. I think it's a way out of some of this loneliness epidemic that we have. For me, it's interesting. I just kind of found myself in a position where I kind of just had to do it. Right. I was like, all right, I was monetizing my skill set for large companies. Right. And that's how I was, earning an income. And now I'm just monetizing my skill set in a different way, right? Rather than having a full-time W-2 job, I've been doing consulting work and some, other really interesting projects and some teaching. And, part of me, one of my goals is to go back to a, W-2 kind of full-time job at some point. But this concept of upskilling and reskilling and challenging yourself is important. And I think to anybody that finds themselves of like unexpectedly in a situation where they're, oh my God, I'm not working or whatever, like embrace it, but standing still is not an option, right? You have to go off and figure out something to do.
Yeah,
The biggest, coolest thing that's happened to me the last, call it 24 months, is the amount of people that I have, not spoken to in 5, 10, 50, 20 years. And you get back and talk to people, whether you worked with them, you went to school with them, you worked on a project, you were a client of theirs, they were a client of you. People are so willing to help. And it's always fun to just get back and connect with people. And that's where the power of the internet and the power of, kind of multiplying your message and getting and leveraging networks is so powerful and important. But yeah, I think that it's Stan, like I said, it's very easy to let it erase a day with no productivity. By the way, it's easy to do that when you're working full time as well, right? Like like people can fall into that trap. So
yeah.
I think that, every day you have to have a plan for yourself. What are the 3 or 4 things I want to get done today, personally, professionally? And have patience and don't be afraid to reach out to people again and again and again. I mean, there's people who
Yep.
I probably am badgering them a little bit, but you know what? I want to talk to them. I think we could have a good conversation about something.
Well, power
And being
network is
so,
so yeah, so
yeah,
important. The power network, and Brian, one of the things to bring up there, I think really important there. From me, I've been on this journey too, as after 26 years in one location, you know, kind of reinventing myself in a way, and I might end up at some way. I'm still looking for another opportunity that might be the right fit for a role. But one thing I will tell you that I will not change when I do land another role is I'm going to continue networking. I'm going to continue some of these projects on the side. Like I want to continue doing this because A, I think it just is bringing a lot more value. Um, but B, I think we have to kind of get into a position where you're able to have kind of these
Yeah.
multi levels of interest and quite frankly revenue streams sometimes too. So such a great
Yeah.
point, really more important.
I would challenge you on the term reinventing yourself, because I don't think you need to reinvent yourself because nothing wrong with you, right? I think it's remonetizing yourself or repurposing yourself. I think reinventing, I have a broken ski binding in my garage, right? Well, somebody needs to reinvent the ski binding to work better. But I would just say it's really about, you just change the color of money a little bit, right? And how do you, um, but yeah, the networking, I do think that uh, there's hope, I think, for some of this loneliness aspect of, you know, for me, just getting up, I got on the phone with you. We spoke for about a half hour, a week or two ago, and you just walk away from those calls feeling good, right? You're just like, oh, human interaction. Well, wow, what a novel concept.
It really does. So, Brian, before we get to everyone's favorite round, the espresso round of questions, I want to make sure everyone knows, your business, your consultant business, kind of give your, little overview of what you do and how you get in contact with you if they're interested in working with you for a consultant.
Yeah, I'd say, well, first off, find me on LinkedIn, Brian Soudant, Soudant. Very unique name. I don't know if there's another Brian Soudant in the on LinkedIn. But track me down there. I make sales organizations and go-to-market strategies more effective and impactful by ensuring that companies have the core functions of finance, sales, marketing, and operations aligned on the go-to-market strategy, go-to-market tactics, measurement of performance, and it's a lot of fun, right? And that I work primarily in CPG, but I also can do B2B work. It's a lot of the work I do is cross-functional in or applies to different industries. So find me there. I also have a website, Soudant Consulting Group, which is still under construction, still a work in progress. So I direct people to my LinkedIn page. And you can see a lot of my thoughts and ideas on there. It's fun. I post content daily, and on a range of topics. I try to keep it fresh with what we talk about.
It's great content, and absolutely, I'll include the link in the slides coming up, everyone. So make sure you take a look at that. It's great content, great experience, wonderful, wonderful perspective, and I think these advice goes to all leadership at levels. So if you run an organization and you're trying to be more effective, Brian has a great perspective. Would really recommend him for that. Okay, so now we're into our favorite time of the day, our espresso round. First question we have: best piece of advice you ever got over a cup of coffee?
Best piece of advice I got was when you get out of college, don't be ready to relocate, right? Go relocate, move to a new city, make new friends, discover a new city, discover a new region. And inside of that advice was don't spend a lot of money on an apartment, because you shouldn't be spending a lot of time inside of an apartment in your 20s, right? Go find a safe place to live that does the trick, but your job is to be out in the world, meeting people and discovering what the world has to offer.
What amazing advice! Travel, get to know people. That really is an absolute skill. It's off your phone. It's in people. It's awesome stuff. Brian, again, give a piece of advice out to the leaders. You can talk to the leaders over a cup of coffee. What's one piece of advice you give all leaders right now?
I would say build your network. You have the greatest Rolodex, and I'm dating myself, the greatest Rolodex ever created in mankind, and that's LinkedIn. And there'll be another platform that emerges at some point over time. But I would say, just use the power of the internet to build your network and connections, and then keep those connections warm, right? And if you should be spending 4 to 5 hours. I heard a great analogy: spend as much time networking each week as you are at the gym. So you should be going to the gym 4 or 5 hours a week, or exercising, or doing something to keep your body healthy, and use that same amount of time for networking. And sometimes it's as simple as just calling people and saying hi, right? I'm going to blow up a couple people on their phones today when I'm in the car too, right? Like, and it's just, hey, how are you? What's going on? How you been? And just, really, those are going to be, that could be your most valuable asset moving forward in your career, as your network.
Great advice. That power of networking, and it really and be ready to help others and have others help you. I think both are, it's a two-way street, and what's it's such satisfying when you can help others, and you get added return back. It's an amazing advice. You go back, talk to younger Brian. What advice do you give yourself over a cup of coffee?
Um, don't worry as much. You know, everything's going to be okay. Don't stress out about little things, right? Have patience. You're going to be on this planet for a lot longer than you probably realize, right? And just take care of the little things, and the big things take care of themselves.
I always go back to what Tom Petty said. Most of what I worry about doesn't happen anyway,
Right,
and
exactly.
and it's true. Our worry can really be a real anchor around our neck sometimes. Final question: you could have a cup of coffee with anyone, anytime, any place, anywhere. Who are you having that cup of coffee with?
But look, Matt, I got to go with Coach Dick Biddle
Oh,
from Colgate, right? And I have memories of him with his gas station coffee at a 7 o'clock in the morning, practice. But the story of Coach Richard Dick Biddle is a great one because he spent 25 years just coaching, right? At different institutions, at different colleges and universities, and scooped up a ton of knowledge and gained the respect of a lot of people. And he was almost ready to exit coaching. And I may not have that story fully right. I mean, maybe it was an urban legend, but I think he was about 47, 48 years old, and he got the opportunity to go in and be the head coach at Colgate. And he probably didn't, I don't know if he thought he was prepared or not, but he was prepared because of all the work and skills that he developed over time. And when he was a great teacher to people about life, about football. He built a great team around him. And I guess the questions I would, I'd have for him, and sadly he passed away, last year or a couple of years ago. I would just say, when you got that job at Colgate, were you excited? Were you scared? Were you nervous? Did you think it was going to be as successful as it was? He ended up being the coach there for 16 years. The Patriot League Football Coach of the Year award is named after him. He raised the profile and specter of the university. But I would be very curious just to kind of hear his, I don't think he ever thought probably at some point in his career he would end up like that. And that's why I love following the careers of people that get into these leadership roles of head coaches at college football programs, because they all started as graduate assistants somewhere. They all started as the low. I mean, that's the only way into that industry. But I thought just Coach Biddle, if you think about, he made such a profound impact on so many people. And I think a lot of people miss him and would love to still, go
absolutely.
grab a cup of coffee with him and get him talking. He wasn't the most talkative person at times, but just good gosh, the
Well,
wisdom that came out of his brain
yeah.
was just amazing at times.
Well, I tell you, of all the years I've been around my whole career, I think Coach Bill was able to say more with less than anyone I've ever been around. I mean that in that you got his point in individual conversations or group conversations quickly, very directly, and they were great conversations, but it wasn't verbose. It was, this is what you need to do, here's why. And throughout the whole time, you knew he cared about you. He cared about the team, he cared about you. But his conversations were so to the point, and what a great leader. And I think about how he got buy-in from the team so quickly was really just about being direct to the point, honest, and everyone knew that. And so absolute amazing leader. And I remember the old, gas station coffees he'd walk around with too. It was definitely not a fancy latte. I'll leave it
Yeah.
at that.
I'll leave you. I know we're up against time. I'll leave you with one Coach Biddle story. So I was thinking about coming back for my fifth year, and I went and I talked to Coach, and he's like, "Look, you're a great teammate. You're a great, person." He's like, "I just don't know how much you're going to be on the field, next year." And I said, "Great." I said, "Well, I thank you for that feedback." I said, "Like, I think I'm just going to wrap it up, graduate with the guys I came in with, and we'll still obviously be part of the program moving forward." And we're walking out of the office, and he goes, "Whatever you do in life, you'll be great." He goes, "You got a Division 1A brain, but you got that darn D3 speed."
Direct to the
And,
point.
and it was direct and to the point, but it was also just a good confidence of like, "Hey, look, you know what? Go out, start your life. You'll do great. Do what you've been doing, But always kind of let you know why if you weren't on the field, he was very blunt, like, hey, you're not fast enough, you're not strong enough, whatever. So, but anyway, this has been great, Matt. Thank you for having me on. Really
So
appreciate
much, Brian. Everyone, check out your page. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, Brian. Great conversation today. We'll catch up again soon.
it.